I'm a hospital nurse. I found out why no one can ever sleep in room 14. I couldn't understand why the charge nurse gave me such a strange look when I said I was going into room 14 to take a nap on my break. It wasn't unusual for us to occasionally roll a stretcher into one of the rooms to sleep for an hour or so during break on a night shift. We work 12 hours straight and just take one long break in the middle so we can actually get a decent nap in. I guess. If you want to, she said, her brow furrowed. Oh, Sharon. He's new. He doesn't know about it, Jody, another nurse said cryptically. Sharon, the charge nurse turned and looked at her. Ha. You're right. I guess nobody's told you yet, she said, turning back to me. What? What's the deal with room 14? Now I was curious. It was the only room on the floor we had available. Everybody else was already sound asleep in their assigned sleeping cubbies, conference rooms, storage rooms, you name it. We'd roll a stretcher in there and nap our brains out. Well, everybody who works here knows it's haunted, Sharon said. I thought she was kidding. Obviously. Serious people don't believe in ghosts. People like Sharon, who was as sensible as they come, definitely didn't believe in ghosts. Seriously, I chuckled. I didn't believe in ghosts at all. I knew everything that people claimed had some rational explanation. I had seen a documentary about it once. It was fascinating how people came up with things in their minds and would remember them later and elaborate on them, making them more fantastic, adding characters like ghosts to make them seem more exciting. All a bunch of pathological liars, like the people who claim to be abducted by UFOs, or so I thought. You guys believe in that stuff? They both looked at each other, sending psychic messages back and forth. I had only been working there for a bit, so I hadn't developed that particular talent yet. Also, I didn't know the one thing all new nurses should know. Listen to the people who have been doing it longer than you. They almost always know better than you do, especially when you're really new, which I was. I mean, if you don't believe us, you can give it a shot. Guys. No. Seriously, that's not okay. The voice in the corner chimed in, Liang, a guy who had also worked there for a while. You really should not sleep in there, Jason. It's not good place to sleep. I usually trusted Liang, so I was a bit disappointed he was joining in on this apparent prank on the newbie to the floor. Maybe they just wanted to sleep in there themselves, so they were just psycheing me out, I thought. Okay, guys, I get it, I'm the new guy. But seriously, I think I'll be okay. I'm really not worried. Liang tried again to convince me, but I blew him off, thinking he was taking the joke too far. Sharon and Jody had given up and were sitting there silently, waiting to see what would happen. I laughed self-consciously and went to the clean supply room to grab some blankets and brought them into the room. It was a semi-private room with 2 beds. They were both clean, so I figured I would just change the sheets when I was done and forget about rearranging the room to pull in a stretcher. This would be easier, and I was dead tired. I turned off the lights and lay down in the bed closest to the door. The room was silent and dark. I let my mind drift off to sleep. I had a terrible dream. I dreamt that someone was standing over me, watching me sleep. I knew exactly where I was and felt awake, but really I was still asleep. I tried to lift my arms, but found they wouldn't move. I felt paralyzed and filled with dread as I tried to look up but couldn't. I could only see a dark vague outline of something large and malevolent. I heard the thing speaking angrily, and it began to shout, but I couldn't understand its words. My heart began to race as I realized this thing wanted me out. I tried to stand up, but found I couldn't. I began to panic and thrash about in the bed. Finally, mercifully waking up, I realized I had been asleep and had dreamt the whole thing. The whole thing had been a product of my overworked, overstressed mind. But why, then, did I still feel such panic and utter dread? It felt as if I could die at any moment. The room was silent and dark for a few more moments. Then I heard someone clear their throat next to me in the pitch black room. I felt a chill run down my spine and goosebumps spread across my entire body. The curtain beside me had been pulled across while I was asleep, separating me from the bed next to me. I wanted to believe it was another nurse that had come in and closed the curtain so they could sleep in the other bed, but I knew that wasn't it. I could already tell something was wrong. I had to see. I pulled out my flashlight and looked beside me, terrified. Nothing at first, and then I saw a hand, gnarled and bleeding, green and black and rotten, pull back the curtains from beside me. The face that stared back at me from the second bed was not human. It was something evil, something which had gotten in here which was not supposed to be here at all. It was an abomination, a terrible wrong thing in a place that should be meant for peace and healing. I screamed so loud I woke up the entire floor of sleeping patients. I ran from the room, falling over and bruising my hip badly in the process, getting tangled up in the laundry bin near the doorway. I fled and left the hospital entirely. I've never gone back. I can't bear to be in the same building with that thing. Now that I know it's there, I can never be in that hospital again. I could certainly never be a patient there. The patients would always tell us they had trouble sleeping in that room. I would call up the doctor and ask for some melatonin or some zopiclone, maybe a lorazepam, if it came down to it. But now I understand the real reason why no one could ever sleep in room 14. I work nights. One night I was working at a care home. I was on my break. Nobody was on the floor but me and the residents who were all in bed and couldn't walk. I was watching TV when I started hearing noises from the corridor behind me. At first it was footsteps, so I went to check. I found nothing, so I went back and sat down. Next I heard a wheelchair coming up the corridor like someone was pushing themselves up the corridor. I muted the TV so I could hear better. When I checked there was nothing. All residents were in bed. Only thing I can think of is we had a resident that passed away that month who could push themselves in the wheelchair and use their feet to move if their arms were too tired. I really like it. When ghosts haunt you in your dreams, this is exactly what happens. You feel like you're awake, but you're paralyzed and can't move your body. It's like you wake up in another dream. All you can see is the outline and listen to him growl something at you. I've been through it once. It's shit scary. Can't say I'm surprised that something so unpleasant would linger in a hospital. So much pain and suffering happens within those walls, and something could have attached itself and fed off of it. Let's hope no one gets put in that room ever again. Man, I was under the impression only AITA have haunted hospitals. Kuntilanak, Tuile, Sustan Jesset, Pokham, etc. It's never recommended to leave your room at night, let alone by yourself. It's like they told you or something. Glad you're out of it, though. Point and you're saying 13 is the unlucky number. That's intense. Good thing you made it out. There is also a hospital in the city I live which has an entire floor blocked off for no reason at all. At the hospital my mom used to work at, a call light would sound in an empty room. Never a specific room, just whichever was empty, and within 24 hours a patient on that floor would die every time without fail. She also had a room that taps would randomly turn on if it was empty. Whoa. That was intense. You all should put some holy water and salt in that room. Wow. Point. I remember on the second floor of the hospital I did some shifts at. They said the medics on the second floor would see shit moving around or something jiggling the door handle at night when no one was there. I've heard and read similar cases to you, and in most instances, the nurses and staff that have been there for many years give the same response you got. They tell you to either avoid the area or explain why you're experiencing these encounters. With there being a morgue and dying patients in hospitals, there is a lot of negative energy that tends to draw spirits. Also, many people die there and don't want or can't move on. My advice, as long as they don't harm you, just try to not let it get to you. That sounds like a scene out of a horror movie. Someone goes down into a derelict part of the hospital, alone, lights flickering. Get me the hell out of there. Similar thing happened to my mom. She used to work in a mental institution that was for the most part completely shut down in the 80s, except for maybe a quarter of them that remained open until recently. In its heyday it spanned 3 kilometers and had over 100 wards for people with different ailments. Mom worked in the skiz ward with the docile patients. Most of her fellow coworkers were terrified of being left alone, even in the buildings that were still open. My mom quit about 5 years ago because she said every day she kept getting this awful haunting feeling. It's actually so creepy that the only way they stay open is that they get their funding from filming movies in the abandoned buildings. I'm a nurse too, but I now work in private practice due to all the activity in 3 different hospitals in my city. My anxiety would get so out of control from all the presences I could feel and occasionally see that I couldn't function. I feel it's crazy the amount of souls that haven't crossed. I always worry myself with the why